The sun hung low over the quiet suburban neighborhood as Marcus dipped his brush into the paint can, carefully coating his wooden fence in a fresh layer of deep blue. It had been long overdue for a refresh, and now that he finally had the time, he wanted to get it done before the weekend. He was halfway through when he heard the dreaded sound, a throat clearing behind him. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of the HOA and professional neighborhood menace. With her signature oversized sunglasses and aggressively crossed arms, she looked like she was preparing for battle. "Excuse me," she snapped, "but that color is not HOA approved." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Actually, it is. I checked the guidelines before I started." Karen scoffed, pulling out her phone. "Well, I don't remember approving it, and as the head of the HOA, I make the final call on what is and isn't acceptable." Marcus sighed, already regretting his decision to do this today. "Karen, the guidelines clearly state any neutral or earth tone color is allowed. Navy blue is an approved shade." She pursed her lips. "It looks black to me." Marcus let out a slow breath. "It's blue." Karen didn't care. Instead, she took out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of him. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person vandalizing property," she said, turning away slightly as if that would stop Marcus from hearing her. "He's painting a fence without permission, and he's being hostile." Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. She was actually calling the cops on him for painting his own fence. The anger boiled in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He'd dealt with people like Karen before. But what Karen didn't know was that Marcus had just found out something about her, something that would change everything. And soon enough. She was going to wish she had never made this call. Marcus crossed his arms and leaned against the fence, watching as Karen continued her exaggerated phone call. "Yes, officer, he's refusing to stop, and he's getting aggressive with me," she said, glancing at Marcus with a smug expression. "I don't feel safe." Marcus chuckled under his breath. "Oh, she's really playing this card, huh?" A few minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. A police cruiser slowly rolled down the street, pulling up right in front of Marcus's driveway. Two officers stepped out, one looking cautious, the other already exhausted, like he had dealt with Karen before. "What's the issue here?" the first officer asked, looking between Karen and Marcus. Karen immediately put on her best innocent suburban woman act, clutching her pearls like she had just witnessed a crime in progress. "Oh, thank God you're here. This man," she shot Marcus a pointed look, "is defacing private property." The second officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, is this your property?" Karen faltered. "Well, no, but—" Marcus, who had been completely unfazed, finally spoke up. "It's my house, my fence, and I'm using HOA-approved paint. She's just mad because she didn't get to approve it personally." The first officer turned to Karen. "So, you called us for a man painting his own fence?" Karen crossed her arms. "It's not just that. This neighborhood has standards. If we allow people to just do whatever they want, property values will plummet." The second officer sighed, clearly done with this nonsense. "Ma'am, this is not a police matter. If you have a complaint about HOA rules, take it up with your board. You can't call 911 every time you don't like something." Karen's face flushed red, but the officer cut her off. "This is the third time this month you've called us for nonsense complaints." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the officer wasn't finished. "If you keep abusing emergency services for petty disputes, you could be fined or even charged for filing false reports." Marcus smirked as Karen's jaw nearly hit the ground. "Oh," he said, finally stepping forward. "And before you go, officers, you might want to know something interesting about Karen here." Both officers turned toward him. "Go on." Marcus folded his arms, locking eyes with Karen, who was now visibly sweating. "Turns out Karen's not actually allowed to be on the HOA board at all," he said with a slow grin. "Her term expired last year, and according to the HOA's own bylaws, she was supposed to step down months ago." Karen's face went pale. The second officer chuckled. Well, 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 looks like someone's been enforcing rules they had no authority over. Marcus grinned. And trust me, that's just the beginning of what I found out. Karen took a step back. You're lying. But she knew he was. And the best part, Marcus wasn't even close to done with her yet. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She knew she had been caught, but she wasn't ready to back down yet. You don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, straightening her posture. I was re-elected automatically. Everyone wanted me to stay on the board. Marcus chuckled. Oh, really? Because according to the HOA bylaws, no board member can serve more than 2 consecutive terms without a formal election, which, funny enough, never happened last year. Karen's face twitched. The officers exchanged amused glances. So, you're saying she's been running the HOA illegally? Marcus nodded. Not just that. See, I did some digging after she started harassing me. Turns out the HOA's financial records are a mess. Fees being misused, shady, fines handed out to people she didn't like, and get this, Karen's been using HOA funds to pay for her own landscaping. Karen blanched. That's ridiculous. Marcus smiled. Is it because I have receipts? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder full of printed documents, screenshots of misused funds, phony violations, and her personal expenses charged to the HOA budget. Karen's breathing turned shallow. You broke into HOA records? That's illegal. Marcus smirked. Nope. The financial reports are publicly available to any HOA member who requests them. I just did what nobody else thought to do. I actually read them. Karen whipped around to the officers, desperate. Aren't you going to do something? He's making false accusations. The second officer scratched his chin. Well, if these financial records are legit, you could be looking at embezzlement. Karen's face drained of color. Of course, the officer continued. That's something the HOA board would have to investigate. But if what he's saying is true, this could turn into a criminal case. The first officer turned to Marcus. Do you plan on filing a formal complaint? Marcus pretended to think about it for a second. Then he grinned. Oh, absolutely. Karen staggered backward, her eyes darting wildly between them. This is a witch hunt, she hissed. You're all against me. The second officer shook his head. No, ma'am, it sounds like you're just finally getting caught. Marcus crossed his arms, watching as the realization sank into Karen's face. She had just lost everything. But she had no idea just how much worse it was about to get. Because Marcus wasn't stopping here. Oh no. He was going to bury her. Karen was shaking. She looked from the officers to Marcus, desperately searching for a way to regain control. But there was none. The officers were done with her. Ma'am, the first officer said, tucking his notepad away, we're not going to arrest you over HOA drama, but I suggest you stop wasting police resources. Next time you call 911 for something this ridiculous, expect a fine or worse. Karen clenched her jaw, but she didn't argue. She knew she was on thin ice. As the officers walked back to their patrol car, Karen turned to Marcus, her voice low and venomous. You just made a huge mistake. Marcus laughed. Oh, Karen, the only mistake here is yours, and you made it the second you tried to pull this stunt on me. Karen stormed away, but Marcus wasn't finished. He had one more card to play, and it was going to break her. The moment he got inside, he grabbed his laptop and sent an official complaint to the HOA board, attaching all the financial records he had collected. But he didn't stop there. He emailed every homeowner in the HOA. Subject HOA financial fraud, read immediately. Neighbors. I recently looked into our HOA's financial records and found serious issues, including misused funds and fraudulent fines. It turns out that Karen has been running the HOA illegally for the past year, and she's been using our money for her personal expenses. Attached are records showing unauthorized transactions and proof that she's no longer legally allowed to be HOA president. We need an emergency meeting to remove her officially, and I suggest we contact a lawyer to recover the funds she's stolen. Let's take our neighborhood back. Within minutes, replies started flooding in. I knew my violation fine was fake. She charged me for a parking permit that doesn't exist. Let's vote her out ASAP. And then the bombshell dropped. A homeowner named Diane replied. I work in finance. I checked the HOA tax filings. Karen hasn't just been misusing funds, she's been committing tax fraud. I'm reporting this immediately. Marcus grinned, perfect. By the end of the night, an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled, and Karen had no clue what was coming for her. Because tomorrow, she was going to lose everything. The emergency HOA meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, and every homeowner showed up. People were furious. It wasn't just the fact that Karen had been running the HOA illegally, it was the fact that she had been stealing from them. Marcus sat near the front, arms crossed, as Karen stormed in, her face twisted in barely controlled rage. She clearly hadn't expected this many people to turn against her so fast. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. You can't just call an emergency meeting without my approval. Diane, the finance expert, raised an eyebrow. Actually, we can. The bylaws state that if over 60% of homeowners request an emergency meeting, the HOA board is required to hold one. Karen's nostrils flared as she looked around and realized that almost every homeowner was here. Marcus leaned forward, smirking. Looks like we got way more than 60%. Karen's fake confidence faltered. This is ridiculous. I have done nothing wrong. Marcus tapped on a thick folder in front of him. Really, because I have evidence saying otherwise. He stood up and addressed the entire room. Over the past 2 years, Karen has been issuing fake fines, using HOA funds for her own benefit, and even committing tax fraud, which, by the way, has already been reported to the IRS. A murmur spread through the crowd. People were furious. She charged me $500 for excessive grass growth, and I have AstroTurf, one neighbor shouted. She told me my shutters were the wrong color, and then I found out she painted her own house without approval, another added. Karen's face turned beet red. I did everything for this neighborhood. I improved property values. Marcus laughed. You improved your own property value by making everyone else pay for it. Diane stood up next to Marcus. The financial records show that over $20,000 of HOA funds have been misappropriated. That's embezzlement. The room erupted. Someone yelled, call the police. Karen panicked. You can't just vote me out like this. Marcus smirked. Actually, we can, and we're doing it right now. A homeowner stood up. I make a motion to remove Karen from the HOA board immediately. Another shouted, I second it. All in favor, Marcus called out. A sea of hands shot up. Karen screeched, her voice cracking. You can't do this, I am the HOA. Marcus folded his arms. Not anymore, you're not. With one vote, Karen was officially removed. But Marcus wasn't done. Because what Karen didn't know. He had one more bombshell to drop. Karen stood there, shaking with fury, as the room celebrated her downfall. But Marcus wasn't about to let her walk away that easily. He cleared his throat, drawing the attention back to himself. Oh, and before you storm out of here, Karen, there's one more thing you should know. Karen's eyes narrowed. What now? Marcus smirked. Since you were running the HOA illegally and misusing funds, everything you've done is invalid. That means all of your fines, all of your rule changes, and all of your enforcement actions, he air-quoted dramatically, are null and void. A ripple of excitement spread through the room. Wait, one homeowner said. Does that mean? Yep, Marcus said. If you got fined, you don't have to pay it. If you were forced to make required changes to your property, you can sue the HOA to recover your costs. Karen's face twisted in horror. No, you can't do this. Diane stepped forward, shaking her head. Actually, we can. And considering the IRS is now investigating you, I'd say you've got bigger problems to worry about. The room erupted in cheers. Homeowners started chanting, "Pay it back, pay it back." Karen stumbled backward, her face ashen. "You people are insane. This is a witch hunt." Marcus chuckled, "Nah, this is just justice." Just then the door swung open, and a man in a suit stepped in. "Excuse me," he said, looking at Karen. "Are you Karen last name?" Karen's eyes darted around. Who's asking?" The man pulled out a badge. "I'm from the IRS. We received a report of financial irregularities regarding the HOA's tax filings. I have a few questions for you." Karen's soul left her body. She turned to Marcus, her lips trembling. You did this." Marcus grinned. "Oh, I just got the ball rolling. You did the rest all by yourself." Karen let out a strangled shriek, grabbed her purse, and bolted for the exit. But the IRS agent followed right behind her. As the door shut behind them, the entire room exploded into applause. Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling fully satisfied. Karen had dug her own grave, and now she was about to be buried in it. The moment Karen fled the clubhouse, the energy in the room shifted. Laughter, cheers, and clapping filled the air as people finally realized they were free. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos with a smug grin. "Drinks at my place," someone shouted. "Can we actually plant flowers in our yards now?" Another homeowner laughed. Diane turned to Marcus, shaking her head in amazement. "I don't know how you pulled all of that together so fast, but that was brilliant." Marcus smirked. "Let's just say when someone tries to screw me over, I make sure they regret it." Meanwhile, outside, Karen was losing her mind. She stood next to her car, frantically arguing with the IRS agent. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was just organizing the finances, making sure the community was beautiful." The agent was unimpressed. "Ma'am, we have multiple flagged transactions and reports from homeowners alleging mismanagement of funds. I suggest you cooperate before this gets worse." Karen sputtered, realizing she had no way out. And then the final blow hit her. Her phone buzzed with an email. When she opened it, her face went white as a sheet. From HOA Board. Subject: Notice of Legal Action. Karen, due to your illegal actions while posing as HOA President, the Homeowners Association will be pursuing legal action to recover misused funds. You are personally liable for any financial damages. You have 30 days to return the money before we escalate to a lawsuit. Karen let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a scream. "No, you can't sue me. I was trying to help." Marcus strolled out of the clubhouse, hands in his pockets, watching the meltdown unfold. "Problem, Karen?" he asked casually. Karen spun toward him, eyes wild. "You did this. You ruined ME." Marcus smirked. "No, Karen, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it happen." Karen looked like she wanted to scream, cry, and explode all at once. But she had nothing left. No power, no authority, and now no money. The IRS agent sighed. "Ma'am, let's take this conversation somewhere more private." As Karen was led away, Marcus turned back toward the clubhouse, where the celebration was still going strong. One homeowner raised a glass. To Marcus, the man who finally took down Karen. A wave of cheers erupted. Marcus just grinned. Justice had been served. And Karen, she was finished. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, freer. Without Karen's suffocating rules, people were already reclaiming their homes. A few neighbors were out repainting fences whatever color they wanted. Others were setting up garden decorations that Karen had previously banned. And Marcus, he was sitting on his porch, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, soaking it all in. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. "Diane, HOA attorney confirmed. Karen is legally on the hook for every penny she stole. If she doesn't pay, they'll take her to court. Marcus chuckled to himself. Then another text popped up. Diane, oh, and guess what? She just put her house up for sale. Looks like she's running away. Marcus smirked. Typical. Karen was the kind of person who loved control until she lost it. Now, rather than face the humiliation of living in a neighborhood where everyone knew she was a fraud, she was fleeing. Marcus took another sip of coffee, watching as a moving truck rolled up to Karen's house. She stormed out the front door, barking orders at the movers, her face twisted in frustration. Marcus couldn't help himself. He strolled over, leaning casually on her mailbox. Leaving so soon, Karen? She whirled around, eyes blazing. Don't talk to me. Marcus grinned. Come on, don't be like that. After all, we'll always have the memories. Like the time you tried to find me for painting my own fence, or the time you called the cops on me, or my personal favorite, when you got investigated by the IRS. Karen seethed, gripping the moving box in her hands so hard her knuckles turned white. You think you're funny, don't you? She spat. Marcus chuckled. No, Karen, I think justice is funny. She let out a furious huff and stomped toward her car, slamming the door shut with so much force the entire vehicle shook. As she sped off, Marcus turned back to find several neighbors watching from their porches, cheering and clapping as Karen vanished from their lives forever. Diane walked up beside him, arms crossed. Think she learned her lesson? Marcus smirked. Not a chance, but at least she won't be our problem anymore. With Karen gone, the neighborhood could finally breathe again. No more ridiculous fines, no more abuse of power, no more HOA dictatorship. Marcus stretched, feeling completely at peace. Justice had been served, and for the first time in a long time, home actually felt like home,